Emily, who had just moved to a new city, being single and wanting to meet new people, decided to use Tinder to meet someone. At first, Emily thought the app was just like any other dating app she had ever used before. She swiped right on a few profiles and matched with a few guys. However, things quickly took a turn for the worse. One night, Emily was scrolling through her matches when she came across a profile that caught her eye. The profile picture was of a handsome man with piercing blue eyes and a charming smile. His name was Adam, and he seemed like the perfect match for Emily. Excited to start a conversation with Adam, Emily sent him a message. However, she never received a response. She assumed that he was just not interested, so she moved on. She was disappointed, but she thought it just wasn't meant to be. One day, Emily received a new notification from Tinder saying that she had a new match. She opened the app to find that it was Adam, the guy she had tried to match with previously. Excited to finally have a chance to talk to him, she sent him a message. She received a response almost immediately. This gave Emily a lot of relief. Adam asked her if she could switch to Telegram. Emily did not think that was an issue, so she downloaded Telegram and found Adam. They started chatting. As they were messaging each other back and forth, Adam was charming and funny, and Emily felt like she had finally found someone who truly understood her. They chatted for hours every day, and Emily found herself becoming more and more attracted to him. However, things started to get strange. Emily noticed that Adam would never send her pictures of himself, and whenever she asked to video chat, he always had an excuse. She even tried to search for him in other social media sites, but she couldn't find any account linked to his name. One day, Emily received a message from Adam that sent shivers down her spine. He told her that he had been watching her, that he knew everything about her, and that she was his. Emily was terrified and immediately unmatched him on Tinder. However, that was just the beginning of her nightmare. Emily started receiving strange phone calls from unknown numbers, and when she answered, all she could hear was heavy breathing on the other end. She started to notice that she was being followed by somebody whenever she went out. When she went out, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone is out there watching her every move. Emily tried to ignore the paranoia, but things only got worse. One night, she woke up to find her front door was open, even though she was certain she had locked it before going to bed. She also noticed that her phone was missing. She got on her MacBook to log into her various sites and all over her social media accounts. She saw that she had been hacked, somebody spreading false messages about her. The messages were making her out to be some sort of slut. She contacted the police, but they couldn't do anything without solid proof. Terrified for her safety, Emily decided to put a request to relocate for her job to a different city and just start over. As she settled into her new apartment in a new city, she still couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still out there watching her every move. Years went by, and Emily had almost forgotten about the traumatic experience she had on Tinder. That was until one day, when she received a notification from Tinder. Her phone had reinstalled it without her knowledge and reinstated her profile. She slowly opened the app to look at the match. It was a profile picture of a man with piercing blue eyes and a charming smile. Emily felt like she was going to be sick. She immediately deleted the app and threw her phone across the room. She knew that she could never trust anyone on Tinder again. If someone wants to immediately go to another app, there could be a nefarious reason. Maybe they don't want anyone to see what they are about to do. It started like any other night. I was scrolling through Tinder, swiping left on the ones that didn't catch my eye, and swiping right on the ones that did. It was my usual routine, and I didn't expect anything out of the ordinary to happen. It was just fun. But then, I matched with him. His name was James, and he was attractive in a rough, rugged way. His profile was sparse, with just a few photos and the one-line bio that read, "I'm just here for a good time." I messaged him, and we hit it off right away. We talked for hours about everything and nothing at all. He was funny, charming, and seemed to genuinely care about what I had to say. I was over the moon for this guy in a very short amount of time, and I couldn't wait to meet him in person. We made plans to meet up at a local bar the following weekend, and I spent the days leading up to our date in a state of anxious excitement. When the night finally arrived, I dressed up in my most attractive outfit I could find and headed out to meet him. I arrived at the bar early and nervously waited for him to arrive, but he never did. I waited for hours, but he never showed up. I messaged him, but he never replied. I was heartbroken and confused. I couldn't understand why he could just ghost me like that, after we had hit it off so well. But then, a few days later, I received a message from him. It was short and to the point. "Sorry I didn't show up," it read. "I had a family emergency." I was skeptical, but I was also still interested in meeting with him, so I let it slide. We started talking again, and everything seemed to be back to normal. But then, things started to get weird. He would send me strange messages in the middle of the night, saying things like, "I can't stop thinking about you," and "You're the only one who understands me." I started to feel uneasy, like he was becoming too obsessed with me too quickly. I decided to distance myself with him, but he always found a way to draw me back in. And then one day, I received a message from him that chilled me to the bone. "I know where you live," it read. I was terrified. I had never given him my address, so how could he possibly know where I lived? I tried to block him on Tinder, but he kept creating new accounts and messaging me from them. I started to feel like I was being stalked, like he was always watching me. I became paranoid and started locking all the doors and windows in my apartment at night. I was afraid to leave the house, afraid that he would be waiting for me somewhere outside. And then, one night, I heard a knock at my door. I peeked through the peephole and saw him standing there, looking at me with a smile that gave me the chills. I called the police, and they found him standing on the porch when they arrived. He was arrested for stalking and harassment. It turns out that he had hacked my phone and was able to track my every move for weeks. I was right to be cautious and to not leave my house. He was waiting for the right time to find me caught off guard and kidnap me. What was he going to do with me is anyone's guess, but it was not going to be any good. I was lucky to have escaped without physical harm, but I was scarred for life. I had thought that Tinder was just a harmless dating app, but I had never been more wrong. Now, whenever I see someone swiping through Tinder, I can't help but wonder if they too have had a brush with danger, if they too have encountered someone like James, lurking in the shadows, waiting to pounce. It was a hot summer night, and I had just moved to a new city. I was eager to make new friends, and maybe even find a romantic partner, so I decided to download Tinder. At first, everything seemed to be normal. I swiped left and right, chatted with a few people, and even went on a date with a guy who seemed nice. There did not seem to be any problems, just some fun dating experiences. But then, something strange started happening. I would get matches with people who had no pictures, no bios, and no information at all. They would message me with strange phrases that made no sense, like, "I have the key to the kingdom," or "The world is a lie." At first, I thought it was just a glitch in the app, but then the messages started getting more disturbing. They would mention details about my life that I had never shared on the app, like the fact that I had just moved to a city, or that I had a dog named Max. I started getting paranoid, wondering if someone was stalking me and using Tinder to reach me. One night, I got a message from a match that had no profile picture. The message simply read, "I know where you are right now. You better not leave." I freaked out and immediately deleted the app from my phone, but it was too late. The next day, I received a package in the mail. Inside was a note that said, "I warned you not to leave. You belong to me now." There was also a lock of hair that I recognized as my own in the package. I started shaking with fear and called the police. How did this person get a piece of my hair? The police came and took a report, but there wasn't much that they could do. I had no proof that the messages or the packages were connected to a person on Tinder, and there was no way to track down the person who sent them. I felt helpless and alone. I got rid of my old phone and got a new one. I did not transfer any information to the new phone at all. I just wanted a fresh start in case someone was able to access my phone without my knowledge. Weeks went by, and I tried to put the whole experience behind me. I moved to a new apartment and even started dating someone from work. But then, one day, I had received a message from a familiar username on the new dating app that I had downloaded. It was the same person from Tinder. The messages were even more sinister this time. They said they were watching me, that they had proof. They even sent me pictures of me walking my dog or sitting at a coffee shop when I was alone. This was a total violation of my personal space. I was terrified. I couldn't understand how this person could know so much about me. I started to wonder if they were hacking my phone or social media accounts. I felt like I was losing my mind. Then, one night, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered, and a deep, chilling voice said, "I'm coming for you tonight. You can't hide from me any longer." I hung up and called the police again, but once again there was nothing they could do. How could you just leave me exposed with no protection? This is madness. I started sleeping with a knife under my pillow, and I would check my windows and doors every night before going to bed. I felt like a prisoner in my own home. But then, something strange happened. The messages stopped. The calls stopped. The packages stopped. I started to feel like maybe it was all in my head, that I had imagined the whole thing. Until one day, I was walking my dog in the park. I heard footsteps behind me, and when I turned around, I saw a figure in a hooded sweatshirt. They were walking towards me, slowly and deliberately. I panicked and ran home as fast as I could. When I got home, I immediately checked my phone. There was a message from the same Tinder account. "I told you I would find you. You can't escape me." I knew then that this was real, and someone was actually following me and using dating apps to get close to me. I left my apartment immediately and moved back in with my parents. I knew my dad would protect me from whatever was going on. One night at my parents' house, my dog Max was looking at the window and barking. I looked to see what was going on outside, but before I could look through the window, someone threw a brick through the window, sending glass everywhere. I screamed for my dad, and he grabbed a bat. He ran outside and saw a hooded man. He hit the hooded man in the face and the stomach with the bat. After realizing he had incapacitated the hooded figure, he yelled at my mom to call the police. The hooded figure was a lonely man named Lester. The neighborhood called him Lester the Molester because he was always being creepy, saying the weirdest things to females. Not that he had actually done anything that somebody knew about for sure. It was just a thought. Lester had found out how to access people's phones and control their permissions. From his little computer layer, he was able to see everything, and with that, know everything. He had finally been stopped, thanks to my dad. I love you, Dad. Thank you for always taking care of me. It was a typical Wednesday night, and I was settling into bed, exhausted from a long day of classes and studying. Just as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard a faint noise coming from the other side of the house. I sat up and listened, but the sound stopped. I assumed it was just my roommate getting up to go to the bathroom, so I laid back down and tried to fall asleep. I was asleep for a while when I was woken up abruptly by a loud thud, like someone dropped a large object. Startled, I looked around my room in the darkness and saw nothing. I turned on the lights, using a lamp on my nightstand, but did not see anything out of place in my room. I considered that I might have dreamt about the loud bang. I fell back asleep. When I had just entered my deep sleep for the second time, I heard something in the hallway again. It sounded like soft footsteps, slowly pacing back and forth across the hallway. I got up again and tried to see if I could see anything in the dark hallway, but it was too dark and I couldn't make out any shapes. I tried to ignore the noise and go back to sleep, but it was no use. I kept hearing the footsteps, which seemed to be getting louder and more frequent. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with the situation. What's going on, I thought. The noise was louder than anything that should be happening at 2 o'clock at night, when some people have to work the next day. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I got out of bed, turned the lights on in the hallway. Unfortunately, I found out what was making the noise. I saw my roommate pacing back and forth in the hallway. He looked like a maniac, pacing back and forth quickly over and over again. With the light on, he must have seen me, but he didn't react to me. He was just staring forward with an angry look on his face. He was flush red. I tried to say something to him to break his trance, but it was no use. I was pleading with him to stop because I couldn't sleep. There was no response. He just kept pacing the hallway. When I tried to physically stop him from pacing, he knocked me down and kept walking. He was totally out of his mind. That was the last straw for me. I called campus security and they arrived in 8 minutes. The officer saw him pacing and did not know what to do either. He did not respond to the request to stop and talk to the police. They pulled out their tasers and threatened him with a shock if he did not stop, but there was no reply. The officers reluctantly shot him with a taser, but it was no use. He was still walking, like the taser did absolutely nothing to him. I was so freaked out at this point, I had to step outside in the hallway to catch my breath. I heard a loud commotion and ran back in the room. There I saw my roommate was on the floor and the 2 officers were on top of him. He was thrashing around violently, like a maniac. They put him in handcuffs and put him in the back of a police car after multiple attempts of attempted escape from custody. It turns out my roommate had been at a party and was given a mysterious substance. He apparently went crazy at the party and was kicked out. He came back to the dorm and was thinking about how all the people at the party were terrible human beings and how he would get his revenge on them. With his mind altered, it allowed him to descend into madness and stay there for a long time. He also had a rough family upbringing as well. That was probably causing him to have more of an emotional breakdown due to what he was on than normal people. I moved out and never saw that roommate again. Although I felt bad, I moved out and never saw that roommate again. I do feel guilty, but I did not feel safe in that situation. What could he have done to me in my sleep? Fortunately, I will never know. When you have a roommate, get to know them well, so there are not surprises down the road. If you don't know them, you don't know what they're capable of. I had always been a bit of a neat freak, so when I moved into my new apartment and saw that my roommate was a bit of a slop, I was a little worried. However, I decided to give him the benefit of the doubt and hoped that he would clean up his act. But as days went by, my roommate's messiness seemed to only get worse. Clothes were strewn all over the floor, empty food containers were left out on the counter, and the bathroom was always a disaster. I tried to politely ask him to clean up after himself, but he just shrugged it off and said he didn't have time. Over time, the food containers were left on the floor, and there were spilled drinks that were never cleaned up. The carpet was getting sticky from spilled soda. It was everywhere. There was starting to be food that fell out of the containers onto the floor. It was disgusting, like an episode of Hoarders. I never thought in my life I would be living in an apartment that was this bad. Over time, it got worse and worse. I was starting to get more aggressive with my roommate to clean up. Like, this can't be how we live here. But he ignored my pleas and just kept ignoring the mess. Things took a turn for the bizarre when I started to notice the strange noises coming from my roommate's room at night. It sounded like he was talking to someone, but when I asked him about it, he denied it and claimed that he was just watching the TV. Who was he talking to? I began to feel uneasy around my roommate and decided to do some digging. I discovered that he had a criminal record for breaking and entering, and he had been evicted from his previous apartment for stealing from his roommates. I also talked to the landlord and told him about the roommate's behavior. I told her that I wanted to get out of the lease because the situation was way too bad. The landlord paused after I explained everything and asked me what the roommate's name and description was. I thought that was kind of a weird question. I answered her question. She asked me if I was in the apartment and if my roommate was there. I told her yes. She said, "Get out now. I'm calling the police." What? I quickly gathered my things and took it to the car. I was safely out of the house and called the landlord back. She finally answered the question I was wondering about. She told me that I didn't have a roommate. As I was on the phone with the landlord, I saw a man climbing up to my bedroom window. The police pulled up and saw the man climbing. They shined a big spotlight on him. Startled, he fell about 2 stories and landed on the ground. They secured him and came to talk to me. I explained the situation. They went up to the apartment with guns drawn. I remember hearing 3 distinct shots from my former apartment. One big blast that sounded like a shotgun, followed by 2 smaller shots that sounded like handguns. I saw an ambulance arrive and 3 more cop cars. It was a circus for sure. The roommate I thought I had was a squatter that decided to crash the place while my landlord was in between leases. I moved in thinking he was my roommate, but he was just there. He had a shotgun in his room the whole time and decided to try and use it on the police. I'm lucky it wasn't me. The landlord let me break the lease and gave me my deposit back. I appreciated that, but I was traumatized for life. I got another apartment, but a studio. I never got a roommate again. There was always something off about my new roommate, Emily. She was always so quiet and seemed to disappear for hours at a time. I never knew where she went or what she was doing. One night, I was lying in the bed, trying to sleep, when I heard a faint noise coming from Emily's room. It sounded like scratching, like someone was trying to claw their way out. I sat up in bed, my heart racing, and listened more closely. The scratching continued for a few more minutes before it stopped abruptly. I laid back down, trying to convince myself it was just a rat or something, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The next day, I asked Emily if she had heard anything strange last night. She looked at me with a blank expression and said no, she hadn't heard anything. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was lying to me. As the weeks went on, the scratching noises continued. I started to dread going to bed at night, wondering what I would hear. One night, I couldn't take it anymore and decided to investigate. I tiptoed to Emily's room and slowly opened the door. Inside, I found Emily crouched in a corner, her nails long and sharpened to a point. She was scratching at the walls, muttering to herself. Once I saw this, I backed away slowly, my heart racing. I knew I had to get out of there, but I didn't want to leave Emily behind. I tried to calm her down and persuade her to come with me, but she just stared at me blankly. I knew I couldn't stay there any longer. I gathered my things and left in the dead of night, never looking back. I never found out what happened to Emily, but I knew I never wanted to see her again. These stories are from a female's perspective. It had been a while since I had been out with a guy, and I was desperate for a date. I had been swiping left and right on various dating apps for weeks with no luck. I am not an ugly girl by any means. I was just having a stroke of bad luck. I would connect with guys, but something would always go wrong. A lot of them were just looking for a quick hookup, and that's not what I was after. I wanted to actually connect with a guy through conversation on a deeper level. I understand it can be tough for guys to think like that, but I was holding out. When I finally connected with a guy named David, I was thrilled. David was very good looking, maybe too good to be true. People lie all the time about their pictures, so this could be fake. We agreed to meet at a trendy bar in our downtown for drinks, and I couldn't wait. I arrived early and waited patiently at the bar, sipping on my drink and checking my phone every few minutes. Finally, David arrived, and I was immediately struck by how handsome he was. We sat down and started chatting. I was pleasantly surprised by how witty and charming he was. He was so fun to talk to, and I really enjoyed his attitude towards things. He could not be bothered by the mundane details of life, and had the best solutions for maintaining a healthy mental state in this crazy world of information overload. But as the night went on, things started to get a little strange. David began to share increasingly disturbing stories about his ex-girlfriends and his failed relationships. No, it's not that he was the victim. He was actually the perpetrator. He talked about how he cheated on every one of them and how he had no remorse for his actions. Was this a joke? I tried to laugh it off, thinking he was just joking, and changed the subject, but he kept bringing it back up. I started to feel uneasy and uncomfortable, but I didn't want to be rude and leave. A few things were going through my mind. Does this guy think he's being funny? Is he so egotistical that he thinks I like him more because he's able to have such control over women? Is he dumb or is he crazy? As the night wore on, David's stories became more and more disturbing. He told me how he used to get his ex-girlfriends drunk and take advantage of them. He even bragged about how once he had slipped a girl something and taken pictures of her unconscious body. This was the last straw. I couldn't listen to any more of this. I was horrified and couldn't believe what I was hearing. I knew I had to get out of there as soon as possible. I waited for the right time and excused myself to the bathroom, and then snuck out the back door. David tried to call me, but I blocked his number. I never heard from him again. He must have moved on to the next girl. Sometimes in conversation, people say crazy, off-the-wall things. Maybe sometimes what they're saying is true. It was a hot summer day when I decided to go out on a date with Jim, a guy I had just met at a conference and later found on Instagram. He seemed charming and cute in his profile picture. We had chatted a little bit, but not enough to really get to know each other. We were working on connecting face to face for the first time. However, as soon as I met him in person, I knew something was off. We decided to meet at a trendy coffee shop, and I was happy as it was nice and public. I showed up on time and looked around to see if Jim was there. I did not see him at all. I got a table and sat down. I would order a coffee until he arrived. I'm sure he would want to order together, plus that would maybe break the ice a little bit. As I was sitting there, I began to be curious every time I saw a guy come into the shop. The situation was starting to irritate me though. He was already a half an hour late. When he finally arrived, he was sweating and out of breath. He sat down across from me and immediately started talking about how he had been lost on the way. It was hard for me to understand how someone could be that lost when everyone has GPS on their phones. Getting lost is kind of an old excuse. I tried to be understanding, but something about his demeanor made me feel uneasy. He kept fidgeting and looking around the room as if he was expecting someone to show up. He was acting pretty paranoid. We ordered our drinks and tried to make small talk, but every time I asked him a question, he seemed to dodge it or give a vague answer. He also kept checking his phone, which was vibrating nonstop. It was very distracting, and it was a constant bother during the date. The constant vibration was similar to having a third person on the date, and not a person that you wanted to be there. It was very distracting. As the date went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. My instincts were telling me to leave, but I didn't want to be rude, so I decided to give him one more chance. We left the coffee shop and walked to a nearby park to sit on the bench and chat. As soon as we sat down, Jim's phone started ringing again. This time, he answered it. I could hear the person on the other end yelling and cursing at him. Jim tried to call the person on the phone down, but it was clear that it was a heated argument. I couldn't understand everything that was being said, but I knew I didn't want to stick around for any of the drama. I stood up and told Jim I needed to go home. He begged me to stay, saying that he was in the middle of a family emergency and needed someone to talk to. But I did not feel like I could trust him, and I didn't want to be caught in the middle of his problems. As I was walking to my car, I took a different route from what we had taken from the coffee shop to the park, so Jim would not be able to follow me. I also took a route through some shallow woods rather than sticking to the sidewalk. As I was walking, I could clearly see the main street. I saw a suspicious car driving around, and I had a spotlight on it. It was shining it around the area, looking for something. I got really nervous suddenly and hid behind a tree. What were they looking for? As the car passed, I stepped slightly out of the woods and peeked around the corner to where it was going. I saw it go to the park where I was just at with Jim. The car parked, and 3 big guys came out of the car and walked directly to Jim. I couldn't hear what they were talking about, but all I could hear was, "Where is the girl?" Jim pointed in the direction of the coffee shop, and one of the big guys punched him in the stomach. He went down hard. After seeing that, I ran as fast as I could to my car. I got in and I sped off. I reported the incident to the police. It turns out there was a string of kidnappings in the area involving 4 guys. There was a car to keep a lookout for, which matched the description of the car with the spotlight. It turns out that Jim would lure pretty girls to a date, then take them to the park, where the 3 guys would overpower the girl and get them into their car. The girl would never see their friends again, and would be part of a trafficking ring. I feel lucky that I narrowly escaped a terrible situation. I'm thankful that I still have my freedom, if not even my life. Make sure you listen to your gut instincts. Your gut might know what's going on before you do. It was a typical Saturday night when I decided to try my luck with online dating. I had spent the entire day scrolling through profiles, messaging potential matches, and finally, I landed a date with a guy named Jack. We decided to meet at a popular bar in the city. As I walked in, I immediately saw him sitting at the bar. He was tall, dark, and handsome, just like his profile promised. I walked over and introduced myself, and he stood up to give me a hug. I had just met this guy, and he was already giving me a big hug. That was kind of weird. Can I get to know you first before we make personal contact, or at least you invade my personal bubble? As he released from his too soon but warm hug, his hand drifted down my back and grazed my butt, but just barely. Still, he went there, and I noticed. So we sat down at the table and started making small talk, but things only got worse as the night went on. Jack kept making inappropriate comments. He would talk about how my shirt was so tight-fitting on me and could see all of my features. Things like that. When he said that, he would look at my chest and stare at me in a creepy way. It is nice to be wanted, but this guy was drooling over me pretty hard. I understand why he was staring, as I have some bigger boobs, with some cleavage showing. I typically do get a lot of looks. However, there was something in his eyes though that made his staring very unsettling. I tried to laugh it off, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was not right about him. As we were finishing our drinks, Jack suggested that we go back to his place. I quickly declined, saying I had an early morning the next day. He seemed disappointed, but I was relieved to be getting out of there finally. I was uncomfortable with him in a public place, so I was not about to be alone with him privately. I said, I had fun, but I need to get going. He went in for another hug, and I put my hand out and said, I don't do hugs. This is not a lie. I am not a very affectionate person. Maybe this will change someday, but for now, no hugs. I said goodnight and turned around to leave. As I was leaving, Jack grabbed my arm hard and leaned in close, his hot breath on my neck. You're not really going home, are you? He whispered. I know you want to come back to my place. I pulled away and smashed the closest bottle over his head. As he was writhing in pain, I walked out the door and left him there bleeding. Don't grab me like that or you'll regret it. Now Jack knows more about me. That was the last time I ever tried online dating. When you're in a desperate mood, when you're feeling lonely, you only attract others in desperate moods as well. Do your best not to be desperate.